France 24's Emmanuelle Chaze has been regularly reporting from Ukraine since the war broke out. She joins me now on the set. Emmanuelle, thank you so much for coming in to see us, and thank you so much for your reporting over these past 2 years. I'm sure it hasn't been easy. What's it like for you reporting in Ukraine? Just describe to us the behind-the-scenes circumstances.
Well, I've been living in Kyiv for over a year now, so of course I share the daily lives of Ukrainians. It's a daily life made of air raid alerts, of bombings. We've seen on the 29th of December, we've seen on the 2nd of January that the capital, Kyiv, was targeted. Within those 4 days, there were over 500 missiles and drones launched against civilians in indiscriminate strikes, even if Russia always says that it doesn't target civilians. We see time and again that hospitals, schools, residential buildings are being hit either by missiles or drones or by their debris falling. So, of course, it's a very stressful daily life for everybody in Ukraine. There's no sense of normalcy, even when you're not on the front line, when you live in the capital, where sometimes you can have those moments of a normal daily life, which are ruined within moments when an air raid alert just rings. And of course, 2 years on, 2 years since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, you can see the fatigue amongst Ukrainians. They are exhausted. They are in a war of survival against an aggressor country, and you really feel that on a daily basis now.
How do people find ways of coping? I mean, do they find ways to bring joy or normalcy into their lives at all?
Well, a lot of people continue to make the economy work. They go to work. They also socialize with people who are around them. They are trying. They are resilient. But there's one thing that Ukrainians are also tired of is to hear that they are brave or resilient, because they have no choice. So they try to keep going, but it's made very hard indeed by the circumstances, especially of late, where Ukrainian air defense hasn't managed to stop as many missiles or drones as in the past.
I was saying earlier, Ukraine does desperately need money to fight the war, to keep the country afloat. Is also trying to broker security deals bilaterally with its allies. Is there a worry about foreign aid not being available?
There's definitely a worry, because there are two aspects of it. You were mentioning to keep the economy functioning, Ukraine does need funding from abroad. President Zelensky met with billionaires, with CEOs, in order to broker those bilateral agreements. So we see at a time where we hear Ursula von der Leyen or other leaders talking about supporting Ukraine as long as it takes, but there's no certainty as to what will be delivered when. We know that there's a shortage of ammunition from the European Union. There's an uncertainty as to the US support as well, and we see now that the presidency of Ukraine is really trying to broker those bilateral deals. They're also trying to increase their own production of defense equipment, of weaponry, but indeed it is a time where there's a great uncertainty, and we see that being translated when there's large-scale attacks over the country. Simply the air defense doesn't necessarily have all the means it needs to stop the missiles and drones that are being thrown against the population.
Indeed, and I imagine that on the front line then, I mean, it must be, I can't even imagine what it's like for those people who are fighting there on the front line.
There's still people, there's a lot of people, of course, soldiers fighting on the front line. There's also civilians who are still on the front line. We've just heard today that in Kharkiv region, where there's a hotspot in Kupiansk, which has been really like a hotspot on the front line. There's been more evacuation orders for the few civilians who are still staying on the front line. Those people, you have to imagine, very old people, people with disability, their families, or simply families of servicemen who don't want to leave. There's also some children who are still there, and those people are under a daily barrage of rockets, and it's very hard indeed. Plus, soldiers, after 2 years, nearly 2 years of war, they're exhausted. Most of them have been injured already and need to have some sort of relief, and this is why the mobilization law is also being re-examined, so as to see who else could be mobilized. But, it's been 2 years. People who wanted to fight already went to the front lines, so it's going to be very difficult indeed to mobilize new people.
And so, as you're saying now, it's been 2 years. They are thinking about changing these conscription laws. I mean, what's the general feeling amongst the population about the war? Do people want to give up?
No, absolutely not. People are very tired. That you can feel on a daily basis. But even soldiers I've been talking to, even people who are exhausted after 2 years of fighting or of having relatives on the front line, they are in their minds, they are in a survival war, and there's no coming back from that. Since 2014, so 10 years now, Ukraine has sat on rounds of negotiations, and Russia has always bowed out of those negotiations. So unless there's a Ukrainian peace formula being accepted by all parties, there is no, in Ukrainians' minds, there is no way that this war can stop as long as Russian soldiers will be on Ukrainian territory.
All right, Emmanuelle, thank you so much for coming in to speak to us, and thank you for all of your reporting in Ukraine. Emmanuelle Chaze.